Nathaniel Callahan pressed his forehead against the frozen headstone and whispered the same words he'd spoken every Sunday for 5 years. "I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I should have been there. I should have saved you both." His hands trembled against the cold marble where his wife and daughter lay buried. That's when he heard it, a child's cry carried on the winter wind. He turned toward the road and saw a broken wagon tilting in the snow. A woman stumbled toward his gate, carrying a baby, 7 more children huddled behind her. If you want to see how one broken man and one desperate woman saved each other, subscribe to my channel and watch until the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Nathaniel Callahan hadn't spoken to God in 5 years. Not since he'd pulled Elizabeth's body from the burning house. Not since he'd found little Sarah's room collapsed in flames. Not since he'd buried them both in the plot behind the main house and sworn he'd never love anything that could be taken from him again. 5 years of silence. 5 years of waking before dawn and working until his body ached so bad he couldn't think. 5 years of eating alone at a table built for 4. The ranch hands thought he was hard. The townspeople called him cold. The church ladies whispered that grief had turned Nathaniel Callahan into stone. They were wrong. Stone didn't feel. Stone didn't wake up reaching for a woman who wasn't there. Stone didn't avoid the east wing of the house because that's where the nursery used to be. Nate felt everything. He just refused to show it. 5 years today, Elizabeth. He knelt at the headstone, his breath making clouds in the November air. 5 years and I still can't sleep in our bedroom. 5 years and I still set your place at the table before I remember. The wind cut through his coat. Snow was coming. He could smell it. He could. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I'm trying to keep going, but I don't know why anymore. This ranch, this land, what's any of it for if there's no one to leave it to?" He pressed his palm against the cold stone. That's when he heard the crying. Nate's head snapped up. The sound came from the main road, faint but unmistakable. A child crying. His chest tightened. He hadn't let himself near a child since Sarah died. Couldn't. Every small voice, every tiny hand reminded him of what he'd lost. But the crying continued, desperate, frightened. Nate stood and looked toward the road. Through the gray afternoon, he saw a wagon stopped at an angle. Wrong angle. The kind of angle that meant a broken axle or a snapped wheel. "Not my concern," he muttered. But the crying didn't stop. He saw a figure moving. A woman, it looked like. Then smaller figures. Children. Multiple children climbing out of that broken wagon into the cold. Nate turned back to Elizabeth's grave. "I can't," he said. The crying grew louder. "I can't," he repeated. A woman's voice joined the children, calling for them to stay calm, stay together. But there was panic in that voice. Fear. Nate looked down at his daughter's headstone. Sarah Grace Callahan, 1867 to 1873. Beloved daughter. Our sunshine after the storm. What would Sarah think if she saw him now, walking away from children in trouble, because it hurt too much to remember? Damn it. He moved before he could change his mind. Clara Weston had made mistakes before, but this might be the one that killed them all. "Stay together," she called, lifting Thomas against her shoulder. The baby was crying, hungry and cold. "Samuel, keep the little ones in the wagon." "Miss Clara, the wagon's tilting bad." Sam's voice cracked. At 14, he tried so hard to be a man. But right now he sounded like the scared boy he was. "If it falls..." "It won't fall. Just keep everyone inside." Clara's fingers were numb. Her boots were soaked through. She'd been walking alongside the wagon for an hour trying to spare the mules when the axle had cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Now they were stopped on a road she didn't know 8 miles from the town that had told her she wasn't welcome with night coming and snow threatening, and 8 children depending on her to fix this. 8 children. Lord help her. "Josie, count heads." "Already did, ma'am." 12-year-old Josie's voice was steady. That girl was steel wrapped in calico. "All 7 accounted for plus you and Thomas." "Good girl." Clara looked down the road in both directions. Nothing but empty land and gray sky. She'd passed a ranch house about a mile back, but the men there had watched her drive by without a word. In her experience, men who watched without speaking rarely had good intentions. She'd have to go back. Ask for help. Put her pride aside yet again. "Miss Clara." Little Mary tugged at her skirt. 8 years old with eyes too old for her face. "I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart, I know. My mama's shawl is in the wagon. Can I get it?" The shawl. The one thing Mary had left of her mother tucked into that worn, hope chest she carried everywhere. "Sam will get it for you. Sam find Mary's shawl." "Yes, ma'am." Clara shifted Thomas to her other hip and tried to think. The temperature was dropping fast. Even if she walked back to that ranch house, even if the men there helped, it would be dark before they could get the wagon fixed. 8 children, no shelter, snow coming. This is what you get. Clara, a voice whispered in her head. This is what happens when a ruined woman thinks she can save anyone. "Someone's coming." Danny's voice, 7 years old. Irish accent, still thick, despite 2 years in Montana. He was pointing down the road. Clara turned and saw a man approaching on foot. Tall, broad-shouldered, walking with the purposeful stride of someone who owned the land he walked on. Her hand moved instinctively toward the children. "Everyone stay in the wagon," she said quietly. "Sam, you too." "But Miss Clara." "In the wagon, Samuel." She handed Thomas to Josie and stepped forward, putting herself between the approaching stranger and her children. The man stopped about 10 feet away. He was older than she'd expected, maybe early 40s, with dark hair going gray at the temples. His face was hard jaw-set like stone. But it was his eyes that made Clara pause. Those weren't cruel eyes. Those were broken eyes. Eyes that had seen something terrible and never recovered. "Your wagon's busted." His voice was low, rough. "I'm aware. Axle's cracked clean through. You ain't going nowhere tonight." "I'm aware of that too." He looked past her to the wagon. Clara saw him stiffen when his gaze fell on the children. His face went pale and he took a step back. "How many you got in there?" 8 children. One of them's a baby." The man made a sound like he'd been punched. 8. "Yes, sir." "You their mother?" "No, their teacher. Was their teacher. Now I'm—" Clara stopped. What was she now? Not their mother. Not their guardian in any legal sense. Just a woman who couldn't walk away from dying children. "I'm what they have." The man's jaw worked. He was looking at the wagon like it might bite him. "There's a storm coming," he said finally. "Bad one. You and them children, you'll freeze out here before morning." Clara's heart hammered. "Is there a town nearby, somewhere we could shelter?" "Town's 12 miles south. You won't make it, not with that wagon and not on foot with 8 young'uns." He paused, seeming to wrestle with himself. "My ranch is a mile back. The house is big. I got room." Clara studied him. A lone man offering shelter to a woman and 8 children. In her experience, such offers came with expectations. "We don't accept charity," she said carefully. "But I can pay. Not much, but I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the cold air. The man looked at her and Clara saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Like he wasn't used to women who asked direct questions. "I want you and them kids not to freeze to death on my road," he said. "That's all." Clara didn't move. "I don't know you." "Nathaniel Callahan. This is my land. I own about 4,000 acres of it." "I'm Clara Weston." "The school teacher." "You know me." "I know of you." His eyes flickered to the children again and she saw that flinch. That pain. "Heard you been looking after the orphans from Copper Ridge since the fever." "Someone had to." "Town didn't want to help." Clara laughed bitterly. "Town wanted me to put them on an orphan train, ship them east to become servants and farmhands for strangers, split up siblings, send a 2-year-old baby to God knows where." She straightened her spine. I said no. So you've been caring for them alone. We've managed. Nathaniel Callahan looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the wagon again. The twins had pressed their faces to the canvas opening. Little Grace was visible behind them, silent as always, watching with those solemn dark eyes. Managed. He repeated the word like it tasted wrong. Ma'am, your wagon's broke. Your children are shivering. You're standing in the snow with no coat thick enough for this weather. He paused. That ain't managing. That's drowning. Clara felt her cheeks flush. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, but she had it anyway. Too much of it, probably. We've survived worse. I don't doubt it. He took off his coat, heavy wool expensive, and held it out to her. But you don't have to survive tonight. Not alone. Clara stared at the coat. At the man offering it. At those broken eyes that wouldn't quite meet hers. Why? She asked. Why what? Why help us? You don't know us. We're nothing to you. Nathaniel Callahan's face twisted with something like pain. 5 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in a fire. I wasn't home. Couldn't save them. Been dead inside ever since. He thrust the coat toward her. Maybe I'm tired of being dead. Maybe I'm tired of watching people suffer when I could help. I don't know. I just know I can't walk back to my empty house knowing you and 8 children are freezing on my land. I can't. Clara took the coat. It smelled like wood smoke and leather, and something else, loneliness. One night, she said. We'll leave in the morning. Fine. I mean it. We won't impose. I said fine. He was already walking toward the wagon, movement stiff like every step cost him something. Mr. Callahan. He stopped but didn't turn. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said. I ain't been around children in 5 years. I ain't fit company for anyone. You might be better off in the snow. He kept walking. The children were silent as they walked to the ranch. Clara had never seen them so quiet. Usually there was chatter, arguments, Danny making jokes, the twins wrestling. But something about Nathaniel Callahan's presence had stilled them. He walked ahead carrying Thomas despite Clara's protests. Baby's heavy, he'd said, voice rough. You've been carrying him too long. Thomas had cried at first. He always cried with strangers. But then he'd settled against Callahan's shoulder with a sigh and gone quiet. Clara watched the big man carrying her smallest charge, saw how carefully he held the baby, how his hand supported the tiny head. This wasn't a man who didn't know children. This was a man who remembered. Miss Clara. Grace tugged at her hand. Clara looked down. Grace never spoke. Not since Clara had found her in that abandoned mine shaft 6 months ago, half-starved and mute. The doctors said trauma. Said she might never speak again. But Grace was tugging her hand and pointing at Nathaniel Callahan with something like wonder. I see him, sweetheart. Grace shook her head. She pointed at the baby, then at Callahan, then at her own heart. You think he's kind? Grace nodded solemnly. Clara hoped the child was right. The ranch house appeared through the gray afternoon like something from a picture book. White clapboard, 2 stories, a wraparound porch, smoke rising from the chimney. Barns and outbuildings spread behind it, neat and well-maintained. This was a prosperous ranch, a successful man's home, an empty man's home. Clara saw it as soon as they entered. The house was clean but lifeless. No curtains in the windows, no decorations, no warmth beyond what the fire provided. It was a house that had stopped being a home. Kitchen's through there, Callahan said, still holding Thomas. Sitting rooms on the left, bedrooms upstairs. He paused. I'll have my men bring your things from the wagon. Whatever survived. Our things are fine, Clara said. We don't have much. I noticed. He said it without judgment, but Clara felt it anyway. The shame of poverty. The embarrassment of having nothing to offer these children, but her stubborn refusal to give up. The children need to eat, she said. I'll cook something. You cook. Been feeding myself for 5 years. I ain't gonna win any prizes, but I ain't killed myself yet." He walked toward the kitchen, still carrying Thomas. "Get them young'uns warm first. Fire's going in the sitting room." Clara herded the children into the sitting room. They clustered around the fireplace, holding out their hands, soaking in warmth they hadn't felt in weeks. The boarding house where Clara had been staying didn't allow fires too dangerous, the landlord said. Really too expensive. "Miss Clara." Sam stood apart from the others, arms crossed. "Who is he?" "His name is Nathaniel Callahan. He owns this ranch." "Why's he helping us?" Clara considered the question. Why indeed? "I think he's lonely," she said finally. "And I think lonely people sometimes recognize each other." Sam's face shifted. At 14, he understood loneliness. He'd been trying to raise his sister alone after their parents died before Clara found them. "He lost his family," Clara continued, "his wife and daughter, 5 years ago. That why he looked like he'd seen a ghost when he saw us." "I think so." "Then maybe we shouldn't stay." Sam's jaw tightened. "Maybe we remind him of things he don't want to remember." "Maybe." Clara put her hand on his shoulder. "Or maybe we're exactly what he needs to remember." Dinner was beans and cornbread and bacon, simple fare, but hot and plentiful. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in days. They hadn't, Clara realized. Not real food, not hot food. She'd been stretching their supplies so thin that meals had become suggestions rather than sustenance. She watched Callahan watch the children eat. His face was stone, but his eyes were drowning. "Eat slower," he said to Danny, who was shoveling beans like they might disappear. "Ain't nobody gonna take it from you." Danny froze spoon halfway to his mouth. "Sorry, sir." "Don't be sorry, just slow down. There's more if you want it." "More?" Danny's eyes went wide. In his experience, there was never more. "Yeah, more. Eat what you got first, then we'll see." The meal continued in near silence. The children were too focused on food to talk. Clara was too exhausted to make conversation. And Callahan was staring at the empty chair across from him. The chair where his wife used to sit, Clara guessed. The chair he probably still set a place for. "Mr. Callahan." He blinked, coming back from wherever his mind had gone. "Yeah. The children will need places to sleep. If you could point us to a room." "Rooms, plural." He stood abruptly. "I got 5 bedrooms upstairs. Nobody uses them. The boys can take the big room at the end of the hall. Girls can have the 2 rooms on the left." He paused. "There's a small room off the kitchen. Used to be for household help. You can have that. Keep you close to the little ones if they need you at night." Clara nodded slowly. "That's very generous." "It's empty rooms that have been collecting dust for 5 years. Ain't nothing generous about it." He left without another word. Clara heard his boots on the stairs, then a door closing. Far away, the other end of the house. "He's sad." The voice was tiny, unexpected. Everyone turned. Mary was looking at the doorway where Callahan had disappeared. "Real sad," she continued. "Like my mama was before she died. Like she was looking for something she couldn't find." Clara's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. He's very sad." "Can we make him happy again?" The question hung in the air. 8 children looking at Clara, waiting for her to have an answer she didn't have. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But we can try to not make him sadder." Getting 8 children to sleep in a strange house was never easy. Clara moved through the rooms like a general directing troops. Boys in the big room, Sam, Will, Walt, Danny. Girls in the 2 smaller rooms, Josie and Mary in one. Grace with a cot near Clara's room so she could watch the little one. Thomas she kept with her. He was too small to sleep alone, and his warm weight against her chest was a comfort she couldn't give up. The house settled into quiet. Clara lay in the narrow bed in the room off the kitchen, Thomas snuggled beside her, and listened to the unfamiliar sounds. Wind against the windows, the pop of embers in the kitchen stove. Somewhere upstairs, floorboards creaking. She should sleep. God knew she needed it. But her mind wouldn't stop. One night she'd told Callahan. They'd leave in the morning. Leave for where the town had made it clear they weren't welcome. The boarding house landlord wanted back rent she couldn't pay. The school was closed. There was no work, no prospects, nothing. She'd walked these children out of one disaster into another, and she didn't know how to stop. The floorboards creaked again, closer this time. Clara tensed, old instincts kicking in. A shadow passed her doorway, too big to be a child. "Mr. Callahan." The shadow stopped. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "I wasn't sleeping." Silence. Then, "Me neither. Can't remember the last time I slept through a night." Clara sat up carefully, trying not to disturb Thomas. "Was there something you needed?" "No, just—" He appeared in the doorway, a darker shape against darkness. "I heard the baby crying earlier. Wanted to make sure he settled." "He's sleeping now." "Good. That's good." But he didn't leave. He stood there, and Clara could feel the weight of whatever he wasn't saying. "Mr. Callahan." "Nate. Nobody calls me Mr. Callahan except the men who owe me money." "Nate." The name felt strange on her tongue. "Why aren't you sleeping?" "Same reason as every night. Close my eyes, and I see the fire. See Elizabeth running toward Sarah's room. See the roof come down." His voice was flat, reciting facts he'd told himself too many times. 5 years, and I still can't make the picture stop." Clara didn't know what to say. What could you say to that kind of grief? "My fiancé wasn't dead," she said finally. "But I understand loss." "Fiancé." "Back in Boston. We were engaged for a year. I thought I knew everything about him." She laughed bitterly. "Turned out I didn't know the most important thing." "Which was?" "That he had a wife already, 2 children, a whole life in Connecticut that he'd forgotten to mention." Nate was quiet for a moment. "What happened when you found out?" "I ended it. Immediately. But he was a powerful man connected. He made sure everyone knew I was the villain." Clara's hands tightened on the blanket. A woman who pursued a married man. A home wrecker. A woman of loose morals. That's what Boston believed. "Is that why you came west?" "I didn't have a choice. No school would hire me. No decent family would receive me. I took the first teaching position I could find, a mining town in Montana that didn't ask too many questions. And then the fever came. And then the fever came. And the miners died, and their wives died, and their children were left alone." Clara looked at Thomas sleeping peacefully. "I couldn't save the adults, but I could save them." Nate stepped into the room. Not close enough to be threatening, but close enough that Clara could see his face in the dim light from the kitchen stove. That broken face with those drowning eyes. "Tomorrow," he said slowly, like each word cost him, "You don't have to leave." Clara's breath caught. "What?" "I've been thinking about it since dinner. Watching them kids eat like they hadn't seen food in weeks. Watching you try to hold it together when anyone can see you're running on empty." He paused. "I got room here. More room than I know what to do with. I got food, shelter, land. What I ain't got is reason to keep going. Mr. Calnate, we can't impose—" "Listen." His voice was sharp. "I ain't offering out of charity or pity or whatever your pride is telling you. I'm offering because I walked past that wagon today, fully intending to mind my own business. But I heard them children crying, and for the first time in 5 years, something inside me woke up." He took a breath, steadying himself. "I've been dead, Miss Weston. Clara. Dead man walking through a living world. My wife would be ashamed of what I've become. My daughter would have—" His voice broke. He stopped, started again. "Sarah loved people, loved helping, loved making people smile. She was 6 years old and already kinder than I'll ever be. What are you saying? I'm saying stay. Not forever, maybe, but stay until you figure out what comes next. Let me feed them children. Let me give them a warm place to sleep. Let me... He stopped. Let me remember why I'm still here. Clara stared at him. This broken man offering her broken family a lifeline. There were 100 reasons to say no. Pride. Propriety. The whispers that would follow if a single woman lived in an unmarried man's home. But her children were warm tonight, fed tonight, safe tonight. And this man, this grieving, drowning man, was looking at her like she might be the one to save him. 1 week, she said. We'll stay 1 week while I figure out our next move. Fine. We'll earn our keep. I'll cook clean. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Clara's voice was firm. I won't take charity, Nate. Not from anyone. If we stay, we contribute. Nate studied her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly, he almost smiled. It wasn't much, just a slight softening of that hard mouth, but it transformed his face. You always this stubborn? Always. Must be exhausting. You have no idea. He nodded once, turned to leave, then stopped. Clara. Yes. My daughter Sarah. She was 6 when she died. Would have been 11 now. He didn't turn around. That little one of yours, the quiet girl who don't talk. She looks about 6. Clara's heart ached. Her name is Grace. Grace. He repeated the name like a prayer. That's a good name. He walked away into the darkness of the house. Clara lay back down, pulling Thomas close, and listened to his footsteps fade. 1 week, she'd said. But lying there in the dark in this empty house that felt like it was waiting to become full again, Clara Weston had a feeling that 1 week wouldn't be nearly enough. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon unfamiliar after months of weak tea and stale bread. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then Thomas stirred against her and everything came back. The broken wagon. The grieving rancher. The impossible offer. 1 week. She dressed quickly and wrapped Thomas in his blanket before carrying him into the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway. Nathaniel Callahan stood at the stove, spatula in hand, an apron tied around his waist. It was such an unexpected image that Clara almost laughed. Don't say it, he warned without turning around. I wasn't going to say anything. You were thinking it. The apron is very becoming. He turned, and there it was again, that almost smile. It was Elizabeth's. Only apron I got. You want me to cook covered in grease, or you want to mock my fashion choices? Can't I do both? Before he could answer, thunder erupted overhead. Not thunder footsteps. 8 pairs of feet pounding downstairs and through halls following the smell of food. The children burst into the kitchen like a small hurricane. Danny first, as always, followed by the twins, then Mary, Sam, Josie. Grace came last, quiet as a shadow, her eyes immediately finding Nate at the stove. Is that bacon? Danny's voice was reverent. Real bacon. It ain't pretend bacon, Nate said gruffly. Sit down before it gets cold. The children scrambled for seats around the big kitchen table. Clara watched Nate serve them plates loaded with eggs, bacon, biscuits, and marveled at how much food there was. More food than she'd been able to give them in months. Thank you, she said quietly when he set a plate before her. He nodded, but didn't meet her eyes. He was watching the children eat, that drowning look back in his eyes. Grace slid out of her chair. Clara started to call her back, but Nate held up a hand. Let her be. Grace crossed the kitchen to where Nate stood by the stove. She looked up at him with those solemn dark eyes, reached out and took his hand. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. But she held his hand and leaned against his leg like she'd found something she'd been looking for. Nate's face. Clara had never seen a man fight so hard not to cry. His jaw clenched. His free hand gripped the stove so hard his knuckles went white. But he didn't pull away. "Well," he said finally, his voice rough as gravel. "Looks like I got a helper." Grace nodded. "You know anything about cooking?" She shook her head. "That's all right. I'll teach you." He cleared his throat. "If you're gonna stay a week, might as well learn something useful." Clara watched her silent little girl hold the hand of this broken man, and something cracked open in her chest. 1 week, she'd said. Looking at them now, Nate Callahan fighting to feel again, Grace fighting to trust again, both of them reaching for each other across an ocean of grief, Clara knew the truth. 1 week was never going to be enough. The week stretched into 2. Clara told herself it was practical. The wagon needed parts from town. The children needed rest. The weather turned harsh and travel became impossible. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she admitted the truth. She didn't want to leave. Nate Callahan's ranch had become something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. The children slept through the night without nightmares. They ate 3 meals a day until their cheeks filled out, and their eyes lost that hollow look. They laughed again, ran again, played like children were supposed to play. And Nate was changing too. Clara saw it in small ways. The way he started coming down for breakfast instead of eating alone in his room. The way he taught Sam to mend fences and check cattle. The way he let Grace follow him everywhere, her small hand always reaching for his. He still didn't smile. Not really. But the drowning look came less often. "Miss Clara." Tommy stood in the kitchen doorway, hat in hand. He'd taken to wearing one of Nate's old hats, and it made him look older somehow. More like a man. "Mr. Callahan says he needs help with the north pasture. Says I should come if you don't need me here." Clara looked up from the bread she was kneading. "Go ahead. Learn everything you can." "Yes, ma'am." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Miss Clara, I like it here." "I know, sweetheart. I don't want to leave." The words hit Clara like stones. She wiped her hands on her apron and crossed to him, putting her hands on his shoulders. "Sam, whatever happens, I'm going to take care of you. All of you, I promise." "But what if we have to go? Then we'll find somewhere else. Together." Sam's jaw tightened, that stubborn set she'd come to know so well. "Mr. Callahan needs us. He don't say it, but I can tell. He's different when we're around. Less empty. I've noticed. So maybe we're supposed to stay. Maybe God put us here for a reason." Clara pulled him into a hug. At 14, he was almost as tall as her, but he held on like a child. "Maybe he did," she whispered. "Maybe he did." She watched him run toward the barn where Nate waited with horses saddled. Nate said something and Sam laughed. The sound carried across the yard, bright and young and full of hope. Clara's heart ached with something she couldn't name. The trouble started on Tuesday. Clara was hanging laundry when the rider appeared. A fine horse, too fine for a working man. The rider wore a city coat and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stopped his horse near the clothesline and tipped his hat. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm looking for Mr. Callahan." "He's out on the range. Can I help you?" The man dismounted. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with the smooth face and soft hands of someone who'd never worked a day in his life. "I don't believe we've met. Cornelius Harrington. My associates call me Court." "Clara Weston." "Ah." His smile widened. "The schoolteacher. I've heard about you." Something cold settled in Clara's stomach. "Have you—" Indeed. The woman who took in all those orphans from Copper Ridge. Very admirable. He looked around the ranch with an appraising eye. "Though I have to wonder how long such an arrangement can last." "I don't know what you mean." "I mean, Miss Weston, that caring for 8 children requires resources, stability, legal standing." He pulled a card from his pocket and held it out. "I represent the Western Children's Aid Society. We specialize in finding permanent homes for orphaned children." Clara didn't take the card. "The children have a home." Do they living on a bachelor's ranch cared for by a woman with no legal authority? Harrington shook his head. I'm afraid the territorial authorities might see things differently. Are you threatening me? Not at all. I'm offering help. He tucked the card back into his pocket. The orphan trains run east every month. Good Christian families are waiting to take in children. They'd be fed, clothed, educated, given opportunities they could never have out here. Separated from each other, sent to strangers, treated as servants. Harrington's smile didn't waver. Given new lives. That's how I'd frame it. The answer is no. I haven't asked a question yet. You have, and the answer is no. Clara stepped forward, putting herself between Harrington and the house where the children were doing lessons. These children stay with me. Together. That's not negotiable. Harrington studied her for a long moment. You're very passionate, Miss Weston. I respect that. But passion doesn't pay for food and shelter. Passion doesn't give children legal protection. He mounted his horse. Think about my offer. I'll be in town for the next few weeks. When you're ready to be reasonable, send word. He rode away without looking back. Clara stood by the clothesline, her hands shaking with anger and fear. Territorial authorities. Legal standing. The words echoed in her mind like threats. She'd known this couldn't last. Known that eventually someone would notice, would question, would try to take her children away. She just hadn't expected it so soon. Nate found her on the porch that evening, staring at nothing. Clara. She startled. She'd been so lost in thought, she hadn't heard him approach. Nate, I didn't hear you come up. You've been sitting here an hour. Kids are worried. He settled into the chair beside her. Want to tell me what's wrong? Clara looked at him. This man who'd taken them in without question, who'd fed them and sheltered them and asked for nothing in return. He deserved to know the danger she'd brought to his door. A man came by today. Cornelius Harrington. Nate's face darkened. I know him. Land speculator from Denver. Been buying up property around here waiting for the railroad to come through. He said he represents a children's aid society. He represents himself. Everything that man does is for profit. Nate leaned forward. What did he want? The children. He wants to put them on an orphan train. Send them east. Over my dead body. The words came out hard and fast, surprising them both. Nate's hands had clenched into fists on his knees. He mentioned territorial authorities. Clara continued. Legal standing. I don't have any legal claim to these children, Nate. I'm not their guardian. I'm not their mother. In the eyes of the law, I'm just a woman who took in strays. You saved their lives. That doesn't matter to courts and officials. If Harrington pushes this, if he gets the authorities involved... Clara's voice broke. They could take them away. All of them. Nate stood abruptly. He paced to the porch railing and gripped it hard. His back was to her, and she couldn't see his face. I won't let that happen, he said quietly. How you have no more claim to them than I do. He turned. His eyes met hers, and Clara saw something fierce there. Something that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. Then we change that. What do you mean? I mean there's ways to get legal standing. Adoption. Guardianship. He paused. Marriage. Clara's heart stopped. Nate. I know how it sounds. I ain't proposing because I got romantic feelings. I'm proposing because it's practical. A married couple has more legal standing than a single woman. A rancher with property and resources has more weight than a speculator's accusations. He took a step toward her. If we were married, if I legally adopted those children, Harrington couldn't touch them. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. A home. Protection. A name. His voice dropped. And maybe a reason to keep going. Clara stood. Her legs felt unsteady. You've known us 2 weeks. I've known you long enough. This isn't how marriage is supposed to work. Neither is grieving for 5 years and forgetting how to live. Nate closed the distance between them. Clara, I ain't asking you to love me. I ain't asking for anything but a partnership. You keep this house running, care for those children, and I'll provide for all of you. Protect all of you. Whatever Harrington throws at us, we face it together. Clara searched his face. She saw determination there and something else. Hope. The first real hope she'd seen in his eyes since they'd met. I need to think, she said. Take all the time you need. The children don't have to know yet, not until you decide. He stepped back, giving her space. Whatever you choose, Clara, I won't throw you out. You're safe here either way. He went inside. Clara heard him talking to the children, his voice low and calm. She heard Grace laugh, a sound so rare and precious it brought tears to her eyes. Marriage. To a man she barely knew. For the sake of children who weren't legally hers. It was madness. But standing there in the growing dark, listening to her makeshift family inside Nate Callahan's house, Clara wondered if maybe madness was exactly what they needed. The children knew something was different. Clara saw it in the way they watched her at breakfast, the way they whispered to each other when they thought she couldn't hear. Children always knew when adults were keeping secrets. Miss Clara, Josie appeared at her elbow while she washed dishes. Are we in trouble? What? No. Why would you think that? You and Mr. Callahan keep looking at each other, like you're trying to figure something out. And you've been quiet all morning. Josie's face was serious. When adults get quiet, it usually means something bad is coming. Clara dried her hands and knelt to Josie's level. Nothing bad is coming, I promise. Then why won't you tell us what's wrong? Because there's nothing wrong. Mr. Callahan and I are just discussing some things. Grown-up things. Josie's eyes narrowed. Are you going to marry him? Clara's face flushed. Josephine Porter, what would give you that idea? The way he looks at you, like you're the first sunrise he's seen in years. Josie shrugged. I'm 12, Miss Clara. I notice things. Before Clara could respond, the front door burst open. Sam ran in breathless, his face pale. Miss Clara, Mr. Callahan says come quick. There's men riding up, official looking. Clara's blood went cold. She ran to the porch. 3 riders were approaching, 1 in a suit, 2 in deputy badges. Harrington rode behind them, that same cold smile on his face. Nate was already there, standing at the top of the porch steps, with his arms crossed. Can I help you, gentlemen? The man in the suit dismounted. Mr. Callahan, I'm Judge Warren Prescott, Territorial Authority. I've received a concerning report about the welfare of certain children on your property. Concerning to who? To citizens who care about proper Christian upbringing. Harrington dismounted behind the judge, all false sympathy. I hated to involve the authorities, but when children's welfare is at stake... These children are fine, Nate said coldly. Better than fine. They're fed, clothed, sheltered, and cared for. By a woman with no legal standing and a bachelor with no experience in child rearing. Judge Prescott pulled papers from his saddlebag. I have here a petition for emergency custody evaluation. The children will need to be examined, their living conditions assessed. Clara stepped forward. You can't just take them. No one's taking anyone, ma'am, not yet. The judge's eyes were not unkind, but they were firm. However, the law requires me to investigate claims of potential neglect or improper guardianship. I'll need to speak with each child individually, inspect the premises, review your resources and intentions. And when you find nothing wrong, then the matter will be closed. Prescott looked at Harrington. Mr. Harrington has agreed to provide temporary housing if immediate removal becomes necessary. Over my dead body, Nate growled. Mr. Callahan, I understand your feelings, but the law is the law. Prescott tucked his papers away. I'll return in 3 days to conduct my evaluation. I suggest you use that time to get your affairs in order. The 3 officials rode away. Harrington lingered, his horse dancing beneath him. 3 days, Miss Weston. 3 days to realize you're fighting a battle you can't win. He tipped his hat. When you're ready to do what's best for those children, my offer stands. He rode after the others. Clara felt Nate's hand on her shoulder. Steady, strong. 3 days, she said. What are we going to do? What we should have done already. Nate turned her to face him. Clara, I meant what I said last night. Marry me. Today. Tomorrow. Before that judge comes back. That won't be enough. They'll say we only married to fool the court. Then we adopt the children too. Make it legal, binding, unbreakable. His hands gripped her shoulders. Clara, I have spent 5 years running from life, hiding on this ranch like a wounded animal waiting to die. Those children, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. I ain't gonna let some profiteering snake take that away. You don't love me. Maybe not yet. But I care for you. I respect you. I admire what you've done for those kids. His voice dropped. And every morning I wake up wanting to see your face. That's got to count for something. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I've been married once in my heart, Nate. Gave everything to a man who lied to me. I swore I'd never let myself be that vulnerable again. I ain't him. I won't lie to you. Won't betray you. What you see is what I am, a broken man trying to put himself back together. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Let me protect you. Let me protect them. Please. The children love you like a mother. And they're starting to love me too. I see it. Feel it. His voice cracked. Grace held my hand today and called me something. Just a sound, not a real word, but she was trying to say Papa. First time she's tried to speak in 6 months. Clara's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. Yes, she whispered. Nate blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, we'll adopt the children. Yes to all of it. She grabbed his hands. But we do this right. We tell the children. We explain everything. No secrets. Agreed. And Nate. This has to be real. Not just for the court. If we do this, we're partners. Equals. We make decisions together. We raise these children together. We face whatever comes together. That's all I want, Nate said. That's all I've wanted since you stumbled up my drive with 8 starving children and more courage than sense. Clara laughed through her tears. More courage than sense. That about sums me up. That about sums us both up. He pulled her into his arms. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. But it was real, solid, safe. For the first time in years, Clara let herself lean on someone else's strength. Telling the children was easier than Clara expected. They gathered them in the sitting room after dinner. 8 faces looking up at them, ranging from Sam's knowing expression to little Thomas's cheerful oblivion. Mr. Callahan and I have something to tell you, Clara began. You're getting married, Josie said. I knew it. Danny whooped. Mary clapped her hands. The twins exchanged grins. Only Sam stayed quiet, watching Nate with cautious eyes. There's more, Nate said. He crouched down to their level. After we're married, I want to adopt all of you, legally. Make you Callahans. The room went still. You mean? Sam's voice was rough. You mean we'd be yours? Really yours? Really mine? You'd have my name, my protection, my home, forever. Nate looked at each child in turn. No orphan trains, no strangers taking you away. No more worrying about where you'll sleep or what you'll eat. You'd be my children, and nothing would change that. Grace slipped off her chair. She walked to Nate and climbed into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. She still didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Is this because of the man who came? Sam asked. The one who wanted to send us away? Partly, Clara admitted. But not only. Mr. Callahan and I have been talking about this for days. We both want it, for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? Nate answered. Because you deserve a family. Because Miss Clara loves you and I'm starting to. Because this house has been dead for 5 years and you brought it back to life. He looked at Sam directly. Because I need you as much as you need me. Maybe more. Sam stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right then. All right. All right, Pa. The word came out awkward, unpracticed, but Sam's eyes were bright. That's what I'm supposed to call you now, right, Pa? Nate couldn't speak. Clara saw his throat working, saw the tears he was fighting. Pa's fine, Clara said softly. Pa's perfect. The children swarmed them then. Hugs and laughter and questions tumbling over each other. Who would share rooms? Could they get a dog? Would there be a wedding dress? Would they change their names right away? In the chaos, Clara caught Nate's eye. He was holding Grace with one arm and fending off Danny with the other, and his face. His face was alive. For the first time since she'd met him, Nathaniel Callahan looked like a man who wanted to see tomorrow. They were married 2 days later. Reverend Thomas Gray came to the ranch bringing his Bible and his doubts. Clara saw the suspicion in his eyes, heard the hesitation in his voice as he performed the ceremony. But the children stood behind them in their best clothes, and Grace clutched flowers she'd picked from the kitchen garden, and even the suspicious Reverend couldn't deny what was in front of him. A family being born. Do you, Nathaniel James Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Clara Ann Weston, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Nate, at his steady eyes and work-roughened hands, at the man who'd opened his door to strangers and found a reason to live. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Nate kissed her, brief and gentle, more promise than passion. Clara felt something settle into place inside her. Not love, not yet, but the space where love could grow. The children cheered. Grace threw her flowers in the air. Thomas clapped without understanding why. They signed the adoption papers that afternoon. Judge Prescott arrived as scheduled, and his face when he saw the marriage certificate was almost worth the fear of the past 3 days. Well, he said slowly, reviewing the documents. This is unexpected. Is it legal? Nate asked. It's legal. Married couples have every right to adopt, and your resources certainly seem adequate. He looked around the ranch at the children playing in the yard. I'll need to interview them still. Protocol. Interview away. One by one the children sat with Judge Prescott. Clara and Nate waited on the porch, not speaking, hardly breathing. When it was Grace's turn, Clara started to explain. She doesn't speak. Hasn't since... But Grace was already walking to the judge. She climbed into the chair across from him and folded her hands in her lap. Hello, young lady, Prescott said gently. Can you tell me your name? Grace was silent. Then slowly she pointed at Clara, at Nate, at the other children. Family, she said. It was the first word she'd spoken in 6 months. Clara collapsed against Nate, sobbing. He held her, his own tears falling into her hair. Family, Grace said again, stronger this time. My family. Judge Prescott closed his notebook. I think I've seen enough. He ruled in their favor that afternoon. The Callahan family was legal and binding. 8 children who'd been orphaned by fever now had parents who chose them. Harrington was waiting outside when they emerged. This isn't over, he said quietly, his smile gone. A rushed marriage and convenient adoption won't stand up to scrutiny. I'll find something, some angle, some leverage. Nate stepped forward, putting himself between Harrington and his family. You come near my wife or my children again, and you'll learn just how uncivilized a Montana rancher can be. Threats, Mr. Callahan. Promises. Harrington's eyes flickered to Clara. Enjoy your victory, Mrs. Callahan. It won't last. A woman like you always has secrets, and secrets have a way of coming out. He rode away. Clara felt ice spreading through her veins. Secrets. He knew, or he suspected. Her past in Boston, the scandal that had driven her west. If Harrington dug deep enough, he'd find it. And then, what a disgraced woman accused of adultery with a married man. What judge would let her keep children? Then, Clara. Nate touched her arm. You're shaking. I'm fine. You're not fine. What did he mean about secrets? Clara looked at her husband. Her children playing in the yard, finally safe. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, balanced on a knife's edge. Not here, she whispered. Tonight. I'll tell you everything tonight. Nate nodded slowly. All right. Tonight. But Clara saw the question in his eyes. The first seed of doubt. Harrington had already won the first battle. He'd put distance between them without even trying. The war was just beginning. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Nate in the kitchen. He sat at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold, waiting. Tell me, he said. Clara sat across from him. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Before I came west, I was engaged. I told you that. You told me he was already married. Yes, but I didn't tell you everything. She forced herself to meet his eyes. His name was Edward Blackwood. His family owned half of Boston. Banks, shipping companies, newspapers. When I discovered his secret and ended things, he didn't just spread rumors. He destroyed me. How? He published letters in the newspaper. Letters I never wrote. Letters that made me sound like a woman who'd knowingly pursued a married man, who'd tried to extort money when his wife found out. Clara's voice cracked. None of it was true, but truth doesn't matter when a powerful man wants revenge. Nate's jaw tightened. Go on. There was a hearing. A church tribunal. They wanted to excommunicate me for adultery. I couldn't prove I didn't know about his wife. His word against mine, and his word came with money and influence. Clara wiped her eyes. I ran before they could finish, took the first teaching position I could find. Thought I could start over. And now Harrington knows. He knows enough to dig. If he contacts Boston, if he finds those newspaper articles. Clara's hands clenched. I'll be labeled an adulteress, a woman of low morals. What judge would let me keep children then? What community would accept our family? Nate was silent for a long moment. Clara watched his face, searching for judgment, disgust, regret. She found none. Did you know? He asked quietly. About his wife. No, I swear to you, Nate. I didn't know until I found letters in his study. Letters from her. From his children. Clara's voice broke completely. I ended it that same day. I never saw him again. Then you did nothing wrong. The world doesn't see it that way. The world can go hang. Nate reached across the table and took her hands. Clara, I married you knowing you had a past. Everybody's got a past. Mine includes 5 years of being too much a coward to live. This is different. This could take away everything. Only if we let it. His grip tightened. Harrington wants to scare us into giving up, into thinking we're beaten before the fight even starts. I ain't never run from a fight in my life, and I ain't starting now. What can we do? First, we find out exactly what he knows. Then we get ahead of it. Tell people our version before he can tell his. Nate stood. I'll ride into town tomorrow. Talk to Doc Webb, Mrs. Thornton. The people who matter. If they hear the truth from us first, Harrington's poison won't spread so easy. You do that, risk your reputation. My reputation ain't worth a damn if I lose my family protecting it. He pulled her to her feet. We're in this together, Clara. Whatever comes, we face it together. She fell into his arms. Not like a lover, not yet, but like a drowning woman who'd finally found solid ground. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. Just trust me. He held her tighter. Can you do that? Yes. Morning brought trouble faster than expected. Nate had barely finished saddling his horse when a wagon came up the drive. Mrs. Thornton sat in the back, her face grim. Doc Webb drove his expression no better. "We need to talk," Doc said before Nate could speak. Inside, away from the children. They gathered in the sitting room. Clara's heart pounded as she watched their faces. "Harrington's been busy," Mrs. Thornton said. "He was at the general store this morning, telling anyone who'd listen about a certain school teacher from Boston with a scandalous past." Clara's blood turned to ice. "What exactly did he say?" "That you're a fallen woman, that you pursued a married man and tried to blackmail him, that you fled Boston one step ahead of criminal charges." Mrs. Thornton's eyes were hard. "He's got newspaper clippings, Clara. Real ones from real Boston papers. Those papers printed lies." "I believe you, but not everyone will." Doc Webb leaned forward. "It's worse than that. Harrington's planning to petition for an emergency custody review, claims the children are in moral danger living with a woman of your reputation." "He can't," Nate growled. "We're legally married. The children are legally adopted. Legal don't mean much when public opinion turns. If enough people start questioning Clara's fitness as a mother, the territorial court will have to respond." Doc shook his head. "I've seen it before. Good people destroyed by whisper campaigns." "So what do we do?" Clara asked. Mrs. Thornton reached over and took her hand. "You tell the truth, publicly, before the Sunday service in front of the whole congregation. You tell them what really happened in Boston, and you let them make up their own minds." "They'll judge her," Nate said. "Some will. But more of them know Clara now. Know what she's done for those children. Know the kind of woman she is." Mrs. Thornton squeezed Clara's hand. "Truth has a power of its own, child. Sometimes you just have to trust it." Clara looked at Nate. He nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Sunday. I'll tell them everything." The next 3 days were the longest of Clara's life. She went through the motions, cooking and cleaning and caring for the children. But her mind was elsewhere, rehearsing what she would say, imagining every possible reaction. The children sensed the tension. Sam grew quiet and watchful. Josie stuck close to Clara's side. Even Danny's usual energy dimmed. Only Grace seemed unbothered. She followed Nate everywhere, holding his hand, occasionally trying out new words. Horse. Barn. Papa. Each word was a small miracle. Each word reminded Clara what she was fighting for. Friday night, Nate found her in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "You're wearing yourself out," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've barely eaten in 3 days." He sat beside her. "Talk to me." Clara was silent for a long moment. "I keep thinking about what happens if this doesn't work. If the congregation turns against us. If Harrington wins." "He won't." "You don't know that. You don't know what people are capable of when someone gives them permission to be cruel." Her voice dropped. "I've seen it, Nate, in Boston. People I thought were friends crossed the street to avoid me. Employers who'd praised my work suddenly found reasons to dismiss me. Even the children at my school started repeating what their parents said. That was Boston. This is different." "Is it? People are the same everywhere. Give them a villain to hate, and they'll hate with everything they have." Nate took her hands. "Maybe some will, but not all. And even if the whole town turns against us, we've still got this ranch, this family, each other." His thumbs rubbed circles on her palms. "I spent 5 years alone because I was afraid of losing anyone else. Know what I learned? What being alone is worse than any loss. At least when you love someone, when you're part of something, the pain means you're alive." He met her eyes. "Whatever happens Sunday, we face it together. And when it's over, we come home and we keep living. That's all any of us can do." Clara leaned her forehead against his. "When did you get so wise?" "Ain't wise. Just stubborn." He almost smiled. "Runs in the family now." Sunday morning dawned cold and clear. Clara dressed in her best dress, a dark blue wool that Nate had bought her. She braided her hair with shaking fingers and checked her reflection in the small mirror. "You look beautiful." Nate stood in the doorway, already dressed for church. "You ready?" "No, but I'm going anyway." The wagon ride to town was quiet. The children sat in back, scrubbed clean and nervous. They knew something important was happening, even if they didn't understand what. The church was full when they arrived. Clara saw Harrington in a pew near the back, that cold smile on his face. He'd brought witnesses, men in suits who looked like lawyers or officials. Her stomach turned to lead. "Easy," Nate murmured, his hand on her back. "We're right here." They took their usual pew. The children arranged themselves around Clara and Nate, a protective wall of small bodies. Grace climbed into Nate's lap and refused to move. Reverend Gray conducted the service with nervous energy. His eyes kept darting to Clara, to Harrington, to the tension that filled the church like smoke. Finally, the moment came. "Before we close," Reverend Gray said, "Mrs. Callahan has asked to address the congregation." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Clara stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the front of the church. She turned to face them. 50 faces stared back. Some friendly, some hostile. Most simply curious. Harrington leaned forward, that smile widening. "Thank you, Reverend." Clara's voice was steadier than she'd expected. "I know there have been rumors about me, about my past. I've come to tell you the truth." She took a breath. "Before I came to Montana, I was a schoolteacher in Boston. I fell in love with a man named Edward Blackwood. He was charming, kind, everything I thought I wanted. He asked me to marry him, and I said yes." The church was silent. What I didn't know, what he never told me, was that he was already married. He had a wife in Connecticut. 2 children. Clara's voice caught but held. "When I discovered the truth, I ended our engagement immediately. That same day, I never saw him again. But he was powerful, connected. And when I threatened to expose his secret, he struck first. He had lies published in the newspapers, lies that painted me as a seductress, a blackmailer, a fallen woman." Clara looked at Harrington. "Those lies followed me here. Someone has been spreading them, trying to take my children away." "Your children." Harrington stood. "With respect, Mrs. Callahan, those orphans aren't your children. They're wards you collected for." "What purpose exactly?" "They're legally adopted," Nate growled. "They're Callahans now." A convenient arrangement, rushed through to avoid scrutiny. Harrington addressed the congregation. "I have documents proving Mrs. Callahan was publicly accused of adultery and extortion in Boston. Is this the kind of woman we want raising children in our community?" "She was accused by a liar." Sam's voice rang out. He was standing in the pew, his young face fierce. "Miss Clara saved us. When everyone else turned away, she was there. She went hungry so we could eat. She gave up everything for us." "The testimony of a child is hardly—" "I ain't a child." Sam stepped into the aisle. "I'm 14. I've worked to feed my sister since our parents died. I know what sacrifice looks like. And I know what Clara Callahan gave up for us." Josie stood too. "She taught us to read, to write, to believe we could be something more than just orphans." The twins rose together. "She never hit us," Will said. "Never made us feel worthless," Walt added. Mary's small voice joined in. "She let me keep my mama's shawl, said it was important to remember where we came from." Danny jumped up. "She's the only one who ever believed I could learn, even when I couldn't sit still." One by one the children stood, all except Grace, who remained in Nate's lap. But she was watching Clara with those solemn eyes, her lips moving silently. Then she spoke. "Mama." The word carried through the silent church. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Mama," Grace said again, louder. "My mama." Clara rushed to her, swept her up, held her tight, while tears streamed down her face. "Your mama," she whispered. Yes, sweetheart. I'm your mama. The congregation was stirring, people wiping their eyes, men looking uncomfortable with emotion. Mrs. Thornton stood. I've known Clara Weston for months now, watched her care for these children with nothing but love and determination. Whatever happened in Boston, whatever lies were told, I know what I've seen with my own eyes. This is a good woman, a devoted mother. Anyone who says different is either blind or bought. She looked directly at Harrington. Doc Webb stood next. I've treated these children since they arrived. I've seen the change in them. They came to us starving, sick, traumatized. Now look at them. Healthy, brave, willing to stand up for the woman who saved them. That doesn't happen with a bad mother. More voices joined. The blacksmith's wife. Miss Peterson from the school. Families who'd seen Clara in town talk to the children witnessed the transformation. Harrington's face had gone red. This is sentimentality, not evidence. The law requires truth. Judge Prescott stood. Clara hadn't even noticed him in the back. I've reviewed your claims, Mr. Harrington. I've also made inquiries of my own. The church went silent. It seems Mr. Edward Blackwood of Boston was investigated last year for similar accusations against 3 other women. His wife filed for divorce citing repeated infidelity. His reputation, not Miss Weston's, is the one in tatters. Harrington paled. That's irrelevant to... Furthermore, I've learned that your interest in these children isn't charitable at all. You represent a railroad consortium that wants the Copper Ridge land. The same land where these children's families worked. Land that reverts to the territory if there are no heirs to claim it. Prescott's voice hardened. Unless, of course, the heirs are shipped east on an orphan train. Gasps rippled through the congregation. You've been trying to steal children's inheritance. Nate said, his voice deadly quiet. That's what this is about, not their welfare, their land. Harrington backed toward the door. These are baseless accusations. Then you won't mind appearing before my court tomorrow to answer them. Prescott nodded to the deputies who'd come with him. Mr. Harrington, I suggest you don't leave town. The deputies moved toward Harrington. He looked around wildly, searching for allies, finding none. His expensive associates had already slipped out the back. This isn't over, he spat. I have connections. Lawyers. You'll do nothing. Nate stood, Grace still in his arms. You'll leave my family alone. And if I ever see you near my wife or children again, you'll answer to me. Not the law. Me. The deputies escorted Harrington out. The church erupted in noise. Clara stood frozen, barely processing what had happened. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Then Nate was there, his arms around her, the children pressing close. Their family together. Safe. It's over, Nate said into her hair. It's really over. Is it? Harrington's finished. Prescott will see to that. He pulled back to look at her. You were incredible up there, brave as any soldier I've ever seen. I was terrified. That's what makes it brave. Sam pushed forward. Miss Clara Ma. He tried out the word carefully. Can we go home now? Home. The word hit Clara like sunlight. Yes, sweetheart. She reached out to touch his face. Let's go home. The ride back to the ranch was different from the ride into town. The children were noisy, excited, processing what had happened in their own ways. Danny kept reenacting the moment the deputies grabbed Harrington. The twins argued about who had been braver when they stood up to speak. Josie held Mary's hand, both of them smiling. Sam sat beside Nate, talking quietly about the ranch, about winter preparations, about the future, already thinking like a son of the house. Clara held Grace in her lap. The little girl kept saying the word over and over, like she was making up for lost time. Mama, Mama, Mama. I'm here, Clara whispered each time. I'm right here. When they reached the ranch, Nate helped everyone down, then caught Clara's hand. Wait, he said. Before we go in, there's something I need to say. The children ran ahead into the house, their laughter carrying on the cold air. Clara and Nate stood alone by the wagon. "When you showed up at my gate," Nate said slowly, "I thought my life was over. I was just going through the motions waiting to die. Then you came along with your starving children and your impossible courage, and you made me feel something I thought I'd lost." "Nate, let me finish." He took both her hands. "I married you for practical reasons, to protect the children, to give you legal standing. But somewhere along the way, practical started feeling like something else." Clara's heart was pounding. Something else. "I don't know if it's love yet. Don't know if I even remember what love feels like. But I know I don't want to imagine my life without you in it. I know that seeing you stand up in that church today made me prouder than I've been in years. I know that when Grace called you Mama, I felt like maybe the world wasn't such a cold place after all." He lifted her hands and pressed them against his chest. "What I'm trying to say badly is that this stopped being an arrangement for me. I don't know when. Maybe it was never just an arrangement. Maybe I knew from the first moment you looked at me with those fierce eyes and told me you didn't accept charity." Clara was crying now. She couldn't help it. "I didn't expect this," she whispered. "When I agreed to marry you, I told myself it was for the children. Told myself I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. And now I stand in the kitchen hoping to hear your footsteps. I lie awake at night wondering what you're thinking. I watch you with Grace, and my heart feels too big for my chest." She laughed through her tears. "I think I might be falling in love with you, Nathaniel Callahan, and it scares me to death." He pulled her close. "Then we'll be scared together." His lips found hers. Not gentle this time, not a promise. This kiss was a declaration, a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Clara rested her head against his chest. His heart beat steady and strong beneath her ear. "We should go in," she murmured. "The children will wonder." "Let them wonder." But he was smiling. "Actually, I reckon they already know. Josie's been giving me knowing looks for weeks. She's 12. She thinks she knows everything." "Maybe she does." Nate kissed her forehead. "Come on, Mrs. Callahan. Your family's waiting." They walked into the house together. The children were gathered in the kitchen, raiding the pantry for celebration treats. Danny had somehow found jam and was eating it directly from the jar. The twins were fighting over the last biscuit. Grace sat on the counter watching everything with quiet joy. Sam looked up when they entered. His eyes went to their joined hands, and a slow smile spread across his face. "About time," he said. "Mind your elders," Nate replied, but he was smiling too. That night, after the celebration, after the children were in bed, Clara stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. Nate waited inside. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." She stepped inside. The room that had been closed for 5 years. The room where Elizabeth had lived and loved and died. "I had it cleaned out," Nate said. "New linens, new curtains. I wanted you to make it yours, ours, not a shrine to the past." Clara walked to the window, looked out at the land that was now her home. The barn where Sam was learning to be a rancher. The garden where she would plant vegetables in spring. The family plot on the hill where Elizabeth and little Sarah rested. "I'd like to visit them," she said quietly. "Your wife and daughter. Pay my respects." Nate came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "They'd have liked you, Elizabeth especially. She always said I needed someone to shake me out of my own head." "Am I doing that?" "Every single day." He turned her to face him. "I'll never forget them, Clara, but I'm ready to remember how to live." "So am I." They came together in the darkness. Two broken people who'd somehow found each other. Two hearts learning to beat again. Outside, snow began to fall softly on the Callahan ranch. On the barn where the horses slept warm. On the house where 8 children dreamed of futures they'd never dared imagine. And on the graves on the hill, where Elizabeth Callahan rested beside her daughter, no longer alone in watching over the man they'd loved. Spring was coming. But first, there was a winter to survive together. Clara woke before dawn to find frost on the inside of the windows. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Nate, and padded to the kitchen to start the fire. The house was silent, except for the wind. 8 children sleeping warm and safe. A husband who'd learned to love again. Everything she'd never dared dream of right here under one roof. She was measuring coffee when arms wrapped around her from behind. "You're up early," Nate murmured against her hair. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Christmas." "What about it?" Clara turned in his arms. "These children haven't had a real Christmas in years. Some of them never have. I want to give them something special." Nate's face softened. "What did you have in mind?" "A tree. Presents. A proper feast." She bit her lip. "I know it's foolish spending money on—" "It ain't foolish." Nate kissed her forehead. "It's exactly what this family needs. What I need." He pulled back, thinking. "Sam and I can cut a tree from the North Ridge. The girls can make decorations. And I've got some things put away that might work for presents. You do. Elizabeth used to buy gifts all year, hide them in the attic. After she died, I couldn't—" He stopped, swallowed. "I couldn't go through them. They're still there." Clara touched his face. "Are you sure?" She'd want them used. She'd want children to have them. His voice was rough but steady. "It's time." The attic revealed treasures Clara hadn't expected. Dolls still in their wrapping. Wooden horses and carved animals. Books with gilt edges. Fabric for dresses. A small rocking chair painted blue. "She was planning for more children," Nate said quietly, standing amid the dusty boxes. "We'd been trying. When Sarah was born, Elizabeth said she wanted a whole house full." Clara knelt beside a box of children's clothes. Tiny dresses, small boots, knitted caps, all unworn. All waiting for children who never came. "Oh, Nate. Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't feel sorry for me. Those children downstairs, they're the ones who need these things now. That's what matters." They carried the boxes down together. Clara sorted through them, while Nate took Sam to find a tree. By afternoon, the sitting room was transformed. A tall pine stood in the corner, decorated with ribbons and paper snowflakes the girls had made. Presents wrapped in brown paper waited beneath. The children's faces when they saw it made Clara's heart ache. "Is that for us?" Danny whispered, staring at the tree like it might disappear. "Every bit of it," Clara said. "But you have to wait until Christmas morning to open presents." "When's Christmas?" 3 days. Danny groaned. The twins exchanged scheming looks. Mary clasped her hands together and smiled. Grace tugged Nate's sleeve and pointed at the tree, her eyes wide with wonder. "Pretty," she said. "Another new word. Another small miracle." "Real pretty," Nate agreed. He lifted her up so she could touch the star at the top. "You know what that star means?" Grace shook her head. "It means hope. Means even in the darkest night there's always a light to follow home." Grace considered this with her usual solemnity. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Home." Nate closed his eyes. Clara saw him fighting for control. This man who'd built walls around his heart for 5 years, undone by a 6-year-old's single word. "Yeah, sweetheart," he managed. "Home." Christmas Eve came with a fresh snowfall and unexpected visitors. Clara was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard hooves on the drive. Her heart clenched with old fear before she reminded herself that Harrington was gone, locked up in the territorial jail, awaiting trial for fraud. But fear had become habit. She wiped her hands and moved to the window. A single rider approached. A woman, Clara realized with surprise, bundled in furs, riding side saddle despite the snow. Nate appeared at her elbow. "You expecting anyone?" "No." They went to the porch together. The woman dismounted with surprising grace and pushed back her hood. Clara's blood turned to ice. Margaret Blackwood, Edward's wife, the woman whose husband Clara had unknowingly loved. Mrs. Callahan. Margaret's voice was calm, measured. I apologize for arriving unannounced. What are you doing here? Clara heard the tremor in her own voice and hated it. I came to find you. It wasn't easy. You covered your tracks well. Margaret looked between Clara and Nate. May I come inside? I have things to say that shouldn't be spoken in the cold. How do I know this isn't some trick? Some scheme to... I'm not here to cause trouble. Margaret met her eyes. I'm here to apologize. Clara felt Nate's hand on her back steadying her. She looked at him. Your choice, he said quietly. I'll support whatever you decide. Clara thought of the children inside, of the peace they'd finally found, of the ghosts she'd thought she'd buried. Come in, she said finally, but my husband stays. I'd expect nothing less. They sat in the sitting room, the Christmas tree glowing with candles in the corner. Margaret looked at it with something like sadness. You've built a life, she said. A real one. I'm glad. What do you want, Mrs. Blackwood? To tell you what I should have said years ago, that I'm sorry. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. I knew about Edward's affairs, all of them. I looked the other way because it was easier than facing the truth. You knew. I suspected from the beginning, confirmed it years later. By then we had children, a social position, a life built on lies. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. When he targeted you, I could have warned you. I didn't. When he destroyed your reputation, I could have spoken up. I didn't. Clara felt something hot building in her chest. Why? Because I was a coward. Because it was easier to let you become the villain than to admit my husband was a monster. Margaret looked up, eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. Because I hated you for being young and hopeful when I'd become old and bitter. You let them destroy me. Yes, and I've regretted it every day since. Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. This is why I came. Edward is dead. Clara felt the floor shift beneath her. What? 2 months ago. Apoplexy. The doctors said his heart gave out. Margaret's voice was flat. What they didn't say was that his heart was rotten long before it stopped beating. She held out the envelope. Before he died, he wrote confessions. To me, to his children, to several women he'd wronged. Yours is in there, along with a legal statement retracting everything he said about you. Margaret's voice hardened. The newspapers that printed his lies have been informed. Retractions will run next week. Your name will be cleared publicly. Clara's hands shook as she took the envelope. Why would he confess? Because he was dying and he was afraid of judgment, of hell, of facing whatever comes after with the weight of all those lies. Margaret stood. I'm not here for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm here because you deserved the truth years ago, and I owe you that much. She walked toward the door, stopped. The children I hear upstairs. How many? 8. Margaret nodded slowly. Edward and I had 2. They barely speak to me now. They know what their father was, and they know I helped hide it. She looked back at Clara. You've built something real here. Don't let the past poison it. Mrs. Blackwood. Margaret paused. Thank you, Clara said, for coming here, for telling me the truth. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I'm tired of being the person I became. Margaret pulled her hood up. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Callahan. I hope it's everything mine won't be. She left. Clara stood at the window watching her ride away and felt something she hadn't expected. Freedom. Nate's arms came around her. You all right? I don't know. She looked down at the envelope in her hands. He's dead. The man who destroyed my life is dead, and I don't know what to feel. You don't have to feel anything yet. You've got time to figure it out. Clara opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Edward's handwriting cramped and desperate. Words of apology, of confession, of fear. A legal document bearing witness signatures. Clara Ann Weston acted in good faith and with no knowledge of my existing marriage. All accusations made against her were false and made with malicious intent. I hereby retract all statements. She couldn't read any more. The words blurred as tears she'd held for years finally fell. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. Clara. He admitted it. Everything. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. She pressed the papers to her chest. I'm not ruined anymore, Nate. I'm not the woman Boston thought I was. You never were. But now everyone will know. My family in Massachusetts, my old friends, everyone who turned their backs. She laughed almost hysterical. They'll know the truth. Nate turned her to face him. His hands framed her face, thumbs wiping away tears. Does it matter what those people think? Clara considered the question, thought about the children upstairs, the man holding her, the life she'd built from nothing. No, she said slowly. It doesn't. Not anymore. Then let it go. All of it. The anger, the hurt, the years of carrying that weight. He kissed her forehead. It's Christmas Eve. You've got a family waiting to celebrate. That's what matters now. Clara pulled him close, held on tight. I love you, she said. The first time she'd said it plainly without qualification. Nate's breath caught. Say it again. I love you, Nathaniel Callahan. I love our children. I love this life we've made. I love you too. His voice was rough with emotion. More than I thought I could ever love anyone again. They stood there holding each other while the candles on the Christmas tree flickered and the children's laughter drifted down from upstairs. The past was finally truly past. The future was beginning. Christmas morning exploded with joy. Clara woke to children bouncing on the bed, Danny leading the charge with his usual enthusiasm. Wake up! Wake up! It's Christmas. Santa came. Nate groaned and pulled a pillow over his head. What time is it? Dawn. Come on, Pa-Ma, there's presents. They stumbled downstairs together, wrapped in robes and clutching coffee. The children were already gathered around the tree, vibrating with excitement, but not touching anything. We waited? Sam said proudly. Made the little ones wait too. That's very mature of you, Clara said. All right, one at a time. Youngest first. Thomas didn't understand presents, but he loved the wrapping paper. He tore it into tiny pieces, while Grace opened his actual gift, a stuffed horse that Thomas immediately tried to eat. Grace's turn came next. She unwrapped the small blue rocking chair with trembling hands. Elizabeth had bought it years ago for a daughter she'd never have. Now it belonged to a daughter she'd never know. Grace looked at Nate. For me. For you, sweetheart. Forever. She climbed into it and rocked gently, a smile spreading across her face like sunrise. Mary received a doll with real china hands and a silk dress. She burst into tears and clutched it to her chest. My mama had a doll like this, she whispered. She told me about it. Said it was the prettiest thing she ever owned. Clara knelt beside her. Then this one's extra special. It'll remind you of her. Danny got a wooden horse on wheels and immediately crashed it into the wall. The twins received matching pocket knives with their initials carved into the handles. Josie unwrapped a real sewing kit with silver scissors. Sam's present was last. He opened it slowly, savoring the moment, and froze when he saw what was inside. A leather journal, brand new, and tucked inside a deed of apprenticeship to the Callahan Ranch. What is this? Sam's voice shook. It's a legal document, Nate said. When you come of age, you'll be entitled to 40 acres of this ranch, your own land, your own future. But I'm not your real son. Says who? Nate put his hand on Sam's shoulder. You're as real as any son could be. More real, maybe. Because we chose each other. Sam broke down completely. He threw his arms around Nate and sobbed the way he hadn't since his parents died. Nate held him, one hand pressed against the back of his head, and let him cry. Clara watched through her own tears. This was what family meant. Not blood, not obligation. Choice. Love. Commitment. Mama! Grace's voice pulled her attention. You crying? Happy tears, sweetheart. The best kind. Grace nodded sagely. Happy tears. The feast took all day to prepare. Clara commanded the kitchen while the older children helped. Josie peeled potatoes. Sam carried water. Mary watched the bread with solemn attention. Even Danny contributed, mostly by staying out of the way and entertaining Thomas. Nate worked on the ham, a skill Clara hadn't known he possessed. Elizabeth taught me, he said when she asked. First Christmas after we married, she burned the turkey so bad the smoke got in the curtains. I learned ham after that. Safer. Safer. Less fire. Clara laughed. It felt good to laugh. To talk about Elizabeth without pain, without jealousy. She'd become part of their story now, not a ghost, but a foundation. Dinner was chaos and joy combined. 11 people around a table, meant for 8. Elbows bumping dishes, passing Danny spilling gravy, the twins fighting over the last roll. Grace insisted on sitting between Clara and Nate, holding both their hands during grace. Thank you. Nate prayed, his voice rough, for this family. For this food. For second chances we don't deserve, but got anyway. Amen. Amen. 8 voices echoed. Amen. Grace added, proud of her new word. They ate until they couldn't move. Then they piled into the sitting room, children sprawled on the floor, adults claiming the chairs. Nate produced a book of Christmas stories, and for the first time in his life, Danny sat still for an entire hour. By the time the stories ended, Thomas and Grace were asleep. Mary followed soon after, carried to bed by Sam. One by one, the children drifted off, full and warm and safe, until only Clara and Nate remained. Best Christmas I've ever had, Nate said quietly. Better than when Elizabeth was alive. It was a bold question. Clara wouldn't have asked it a month ago, but things had changed between them. Nate considered carefully. Different. When Elizabeth was alive, Christmas was about hope, about the future we thought we'd have. This. He looked around the room at the sleeping children, the guttering candles, the evidence of family everywhere. This is about gratitude, about knowing what you've got and holding on tight. I never thought I'd have this, Clara admitted. A husband who loves me, children who call me mama, a home that's really mine. It's yours, all of it, forever. Promise. Nate pulled her close. I promise. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what family means. Clara rested her head against his chest, listened to his heartbeat. Solid. Steady. Hers. Merry Christmas, Nate. Merry Christmas, Clara. January brought the blizzard everyone had been dreading. It started at midday, snow coming down so thick you couldn't see the barn from the house. By nightfall, the drifts were waist-high and climbing. The cattle, Nate said, pulling on his coat. I have to check on them. In this. Clara grabbed his arm. You can't even see the barn. If those cattle freeze, we lose everything. The ranch, our income, all of it. Then let me come with you. No, stay with the children. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. Nate's face was grim. I've seen men die in storms like this. Good men, strong men, get turned around, can't find their way back. He kissed her hard. If I'm not back in an hour, don't come looking. You hear me? Stay with the children. That's what matters. He was gone before she could argue. Clara stood at the window, watching his silhouette disappear into the white. She'd never felt so helpless in her life. Ma. Sam appeared at her elbow. Is Pa going to be all right? He'll be fine. You don't look like you believe that. Clara turned to him. He's been ranching this land for 20 years. He knows what he's doing. Then why are you scared? Because love makes you vulnerable. Because happiness is fragile. Because she'd finally found something worth keeping, and the thought of losing it was unbearable. Keep the children in the sitting room, she said instead. I need to watch the door. An hour passed. Then 2. Clara paced. She tried to read, couldn't focus. She tried to pray, couldn't find the words. She stared at the snow and willed Nate to appear. Mama! Grace tugged at her skirt. Papa coming. Soon, sweetheart, soon. But her voice trembled, and Grace heard it. 3 hours. Clara was reaching for her coat, ready to defy Nate's orders when the door burst open. Nate staggered in, covered in snow, half frozen but alive. Behind him came 2 of his ranch hands in similar condition. Cattle's safe, he managed through chattering teeth. Lost the path back. Took forever to find the rope line. Clara threw herself at him. She didn't care that he was freezing, that the snow was soaking her dress. She held on like she'd never let go. Don't ever do that again, she sobbed. Don't ever scare me like that again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He held her tight. I'm home now. I'm safe. The children swarmed them. 8 small bodies pressing close, needing to touch to confirm he was real. Grace climbed into his arms despite the cold. The twins grabbed his legs. Danny actually cried, though he'd deny it later. Family meeting, Sam announced. Right now, around the fire. They gathered in the sitting room, blankets wrapped around the frozen men, hot coffee pressed into hands. The fire crackled high and warm. I thought you were dead, Sam said bluntly. We all did. I'm sorry, son. Don't be sorry. Be careful. Sam's voice cracked. We already lost our real parents. We can't lose you too. The room went silent. Clara saw Nate's face change, saw him truly understand what these children had given him. I reckon I've been thinking about this wrong, he said slowly. All those years alone, I got used to only having myself to worry about. But that's not true anymore. No, it ain't, Danny said fiercely. I've got a wife now. Children. Responsibilities beyond cattle and land. Nate looked at each child in turn. I promise to be more careful. To remember that coming home matters more than anything else. You swear, Sam demanded. On my life. On our lives, Clara corrected. Because that's what you'd be risking. All of us. Nate nodded slowly. On all our lives. The tension broke. The children relaxed. Even Grace, who'd been clutching Nate's shirt, loosened her grip slightly. Now, Clara said briskly, everyone to bed. It's late, and tomorrow we'll have snow to dig out of. The children scattered, suddenly exhausted by the emotional roller coaster. Clara stayed behind to help the ranch hands get settled in the kitchen with more coffee and warm food. When she finally returned to the bedroom, Nate was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. I almost died tonight, he said without looking up. The cold, the snow. There was a moment when I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't remember which direction was home. Clara sat beside him. What saved you? Grace. He looked up, eyes bright. I kept hearing her voice, saying Papa, over and over, like a beacon. His voice broke. 3 years ago, I would have laid down in that snow and let it take me. Tonight, I fought, because I had something to fight for. Clara took his frozen hands in hers. That's what love does. It gives you reasons to keep going. I didn't know, Nate whispered. After Elizabeth died, I thought I understood love, understood loss, but I didn't. Not really. Not until I had something to lose again. Are you scared? Terrified. Every day. He pulled her close. But I wouldn't trade it. Not for all the safety in the world. They held each other in the darkness while the blizzard raged outside. Tomorrow would bring digging out, checking on cattle, repairing whatever the storm had damaged. But tonight, they were alive. Together. A family. That was enough. That was everything. The thaw came in late February, slow and muddy, and full of promise. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the last of the snow melt into the ground. Behind her, the house hummed with morning chaos. Danny and the twins arguing over chores. Josie braiding Mary's hair. Sam already outside working with Nate on the spring fence repairs. Grace sat at the table, laboriously copying letters from a slate. Her vocabulary had grown to nearly 100 words. Doc Webb called it a miracle. Clara called it love. "Mama," Grace held up her slate. "Good." Clara examined the crooked letters. "Beautiful sweetheart. You're learning so fast. Smart like you." "Smarter. Much smarter." Thomas toddled over, grabbing Clara's skirt for balance. At nearly 3, he was finally walking confidently, though he still preferred being carried. Clara scooped him up. "And what do you want, little man? Eat. Always hungry, just like your father." "Papa." Thomas pointed at the window where Nate and Sam were visible. "That's right. Papa's working. We'll see him at dinner." She looked at her kitchen, at her children, at the life she'd built from ashes and stubbornness. 6 months ago, she'd stumbled up a stranger's drive with 8 starving orphans and no hope. Now she was Clara Callahan. Wife, mother, home. "Mama." Grace tugged her sleeve. "Yes, sweetheart. Love you." 3 words. The same 3 words Clara had yearned to hear for years. Not from a man who would betray her, not from a society that would judge her, from a 6-year-old girl who'd been silent for so long and who'd finally found her voice. Clara knelt down and pulled Grace into her arms. "I love you too, baby girl. More than all the stars in the sky." "That's a lot," Grace said seriously. "Yes, it is, but not nearly enough." Through the window, Clara saw Nate look up from his work. He caught her eye and smiled. That smile that had taken months to earn. That smile that meant safety and home and forever. She smiled back. Spring arrived with mud and wildflowers and a letter that changed everything. Clara found it in the mail sack Nate brought from town. A thick envelope with a Boston postmark and her maiden name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "What is it?" Nate asked, watching her face. Clara read the first line and sat down hard in the nearest chair. "Clara, it's from a lawyer in Boston." Her voice came out strange, distant. "My father died." Nate went still. "I thought you didn't have family." "I don't. Didn't." Clara stared at the letter, trying to make the words make sense. "He disowned me when the scandal broke. Said I was no daughter of his. I haven't heard from him in 3 years." "What does the lawyer want?" Clara read further. The words blurred together. "Estate, inheritance, sole surviving heir. He left me everything." She looked up at Nate, shocked. "My father left me everything. The house in Boston, the shipping business, all of it." "How much is everything?" Clara found the number, read it 3 times to make sure she understood. "Enough to buy a ranch twice this size, maybe 3 times. Nate sat down across from her. His face was carefully neutral. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I never expected—" Clara set the letter down. "He disowned me, Nate. Threw me out. Told everyone I was dead to him. And now he leaves me his entire fortune." Maybe he regretted it. "He never wrote. Never tried to contact me. Never once in 3 years. Some people don't know how to say sorry, so they say it with money instead." Clara laughed bitterly. "That's exactly what he would do. Grand gestures instead of words. Actions that don't require vulnerability. You don't have to decide anything today." "No, but I do have to decide eventually." Clara looked around the kitchen, at the house that had become her home. "This changes things, doesn't it?" Nate's jaw tightened. "Does it?" I don't know. I don't know what it changes. Clara. Nate reached across and took her hands. I married you when you had nothing. When you were running from scandal and caring for 8 orphans on pennies and prayer. Whatever this letter says, whatever money your father left, it doesn't change who you are, who we are. But people will talk. They'll say I married you for convenience, then inherited a fortune. They'll say, let them say whatever they want. We know the truth. Clara squeezed his hands. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. But Clara saw the fear in his eyes, the question he wouldn't ask. Would she stay? The children found out by accident. Danny always curious, always getting into things he shouldn't, discovered the letter on Clara's desk. By dinner, everyone knew. So we're rich now? Danny asked, eyes wide. Like proper rich. The inheritance is complicated, Clara said carefully. There are businesses to manage, properties to deal with. It's not just money sitting in a vault. But we could have anything we want, horses and candy and new boots. Danny, that's not how it works. Actually, Josie said quietly. It kind of is. I read about inheritances in one of the books Miss Peterson lent me. If Ma inherited everything, she controls it all. She could do anything she wanted. 8 pairs of eyes turned to Clara. What would you want to do? Sam asked. His voice was neutral, but Clara heard the real question underneath. If you could do anything. Clara looked at her family. At Nate carefully not reacting. At Sam trying to be strong. At Grace clutching her fork with sudden anxiety. I want to stay here, Clara said firmly. This is our home. That's not changing. But Boston, Josie started. Boston isn't my home anymore. Boston is where I was betrayed and abandoned. Montana is where I found my family. Clara reached for Nate's hand. This money doesn't define us. It doesn't change who we are. Then what are you going to do with it? Sam pressed. Clara had been thinking about this all afternoon. The answer had come slowly then, all at once. I want to build a school, she said. A real school here in Elkhorn Valley, where every child can learn regardless of their family's circumstances. Nate looked at her sharply. A school? I'm a teacher. It's what I know, what I love. Clara's voice strengthened. There are children all over this territory who can't get an education. Orphans, ranch kids, children whose families can't spare them from work. I want to give them what I gave our children. A chance. The table was silent. Then Grace spoke. Miss Peterson's school. Better than Miss Peterson's school. A real building with books and supplies and teachers who care. A place where children like you can learn to be anything they want. Grace considered this with her usual solemnity. Then she smiled. Good, she said. Very good. That settled it. Building the school took months. Clara threw herself into the project with the same determination she'd brought to saving 8 orphans. She hired architects from Denver, ordered books from back east, recruited teachers from the Territorial College. The building rose on land donated by Nate close enough to town for children to walk far enough for peace and quiet. Red brick and tall windows, a bell tower that could be seen for miles. Callahan Academy, Nate read from the sign being installed. I thought you wanted to call it something else. I changed my mind. Clara slipped her hand into his. This school exists because of what you did, taking us in, giving us a home, giving me a reason to hope again. You built it, you raised the money, you made it happen. We made it happen, together. Clara looked at the building, at the dream becoming real. Everything good in my life started because a broken rancher set an extra plate at his Thanksgiving table. This school is my way of paying that forward. Nate was quiet for a long moment. Elizabeth would have loved this. Would she? She always said education was the great equalizer, that a child with books could become anything. He smiled softly. She'd have been first in line to volunteer. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. Then we'll make sure her spirit is part of it. We'll have a library, the Elizabeth Callahan Memorial Library. Nate's arm tightened around her. He didn't speak, but she felt his gratitude in the way he held her. The school opened in September one year to the day after Clara had stumbled up Nate's drive. 50 children attended the first day. Ranch kids and town kids, orphans from the territory's scattered settlements, even a few children from the Crow Reservation whose families wanted them to learn English. Clara stood at the front of the main classroom and felt tears pricking her eyes. "Welcome," she said, her voice carrying to every corner, "to Callahan Academy. Here every one of you matters, every one of you can learn, and every one of you will be treated with respect and dignity no matter where you came from." Josie and Sam sat in the front row, helping to demonstrate what education could do. The twins were in the middle, suspiciously well-behaved. Danny was already whispering to his neighbor. Mary and Grace sat together, Grace proudly showing off her reading skills to a nervous younger girl. Clara caught Nate's eye through the window. He stood outside watching, his face full of something she'd never seen there before. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride. That evening, after the children were in bed, Clara found him on the porch. He was looking out at the land, at the school visible in the distance, at the life they'd built together. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him. "Just thinking about how different everything is." He pulled her close. "A year ago, I was waiting to die, counting the days until I could join Elizabeth and Sarah. Now I can't imagine wanting to leave. Can't imagine not seeing those children grow up. Can't imagine a morning without you beside me." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "I have something to tell you." "What?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Nate went still. "Clara, Doc Webb confirmed it today. I wasn't sure, but now I am. You're having a baby. Our baby. Yours and mine." Nate's face transformed. The walls he'd built, the grief he'd carried, all of it fell away. He pulled her into his arms and held on like he was afraid she'd disappear. "A baby," he whispered. "Clara, are you sure?" "I'm sure. About 7 months along, Doc thinks. The baby will come in spring." Nate pulled back to look at her. His eyes were bright with tears he didn't try to hide. "I never thought I'd have this again. A child of my own. Someone to carry on when I'm gone." "You have 8 children already." "I know, and I love them more than I ever thought possible. But this—" He placed his hand on her stomach again, gentle as a prayer. "This is different. This is proof that life goes on. That hope wins. Are you happy? Happy doesn't cover it." Nate laughed, overwhelmed. "I don't have words for what I'm feeling. Scared and grateful and amazed and—" He kissed her deep and true. "I love you, Clara Callahan. I love our family. I love this life we've made. I love you too." They stood together in the darkness, hand in hand, waiting for the future to unfold. The children took the news exactly as Clara expected. Danny immediately began lobbying for a brother. The twins wanted to know if twins ran in families. Josie started planning practical things like baby clothes and feeding schedules. Mary asked if she could help name the baby. Sam hung back, watching with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. Sam. She found him in the barn that afternoon, mucking out stalls with unnecessary force. "Want to talk about it?" "Nothing to talk about." "Then why are you taking out your feelings on the horse manure?" Sam stopped, leaned on his pitchfork, didn't meet her eyes. "It's fine, Ma. I'm happy for you, truly. But nothing. Samuel Porter Callahan. Look at me." He looked up, and Clara saw the fear he was trying to hide. "You're worried this baby changes things," she said gently. "Doesn't it? A real baby. Your real baby. Your blood." Sam's voice cracked. "We're just strays you took in, but this baby will be yours." Clara crossed the barn and pulled him into a hug. At 14, he was taller than her now, but he held on like a little boy. "Listen to me," she said fiercely. "You are not a stray. You are not less than. You are my son. Legally, officially, forever. Nothing, no baby, no blood, no anything changes that. But, no buts. When I married your father, when we adopted you, we made promises. Those promises don't have exceptions, don't have conditions." She pulled back to look him in the eye. "Do you think Pa loves Grace less because she's not his blood? No. Do you think I love you less because I didn't give birth to you?" Sam's lip trembled. "No, ma'am." "Then trust us. Trust that our family is real. Trust that love doesn't divide, it multiplies." Clara touched his face. "This baby will have 8 older brothers and sisters who will spoil it rotten and teach it mischief and protect it from everything bad in the world. That's a gift, Sam, not a threat." Sam nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't feel this way." "Feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are. What matters is what you do with them." Clara smiled. "Now finish those stalls and come to dinner. Your father's making his famous ham." "The kind that's safe because there's no fire?" "Exactly that kind." Sam laughed. It was shaky, but it was real. "I love you, Ma." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always and forever." Winter came again, softer this time. Clara grew round with the baby while the family grew closer. Nate built a cradle in the evenings while the children watched. Sam started teaching the younger ones ranch work. Grace's vocabulary expanded to include words like sister and brother and family. One night in February, Clara woke to a twisting pain in her belly. "Nate?" She shook his shoulder. "Nate, wake up!" He came awake instantly. "What is it? The baby's coming?" Everything happened fast after that. Nate sent Sam racing to town for Doc Webb. Josie boiled water and gathered clean cloths. Mary herded the younger children to the sitting room and distracted them with stories. Clara labored for hours. The pain was unlike anything she'd experienced, wave after wave that left her breathless and trembling. "You're doing fine," Nate said, holding her hand. "You're doing perfect." "I'm dying," Clara gasped. "You're not dying. You're bringing life into the world. That's different." "Easy for you to say." Doc Webb arrived as dawn was breaking. He examined Clara and nodded with satisfaction. "Nearly there, Mrs. Callahan. Few more pushes and you'll have your baby." Clara pushed and screamed in a way she'd remember with embarrassment for years. Then, finally, a different cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Doc Webb announced. "A healthy, perfect girl." He placed the baby in Clara's arms. She looked down at the tiny wrinkled face, at the dark hair and the scrunched eyes, and felt her heart expand to make room. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Nate leaned over her shoulder. His face was wet with tears. "She's beautiful," he said. "Clara, she's beautiful. She looks like you. She looks like us." The door burst open. 8 children tumbled in, unable to wait any longer. They crowded around the bed, eyes wide, voices hushed. "Is that her?" Danny whispered. "Is that our sister?" "This is her," Clara said. "This is Hope." "Hope?" Josie asked. "Hope Elizabeth Callahan." Clara looked at Nate. "Because she's proof that hope survives, that love wins, that even after the darkest winter, spring always comes." Grace climbed onto the bed and peered at the baby with serious eyes. "Pretty," she announced. "Very pretty. My sister. Your sister. All of yours." 8 children leaned in to get a closer look. 8 faces full of wonder and love, and the beginning of fierce protectiveness. Clara held her baby. Her husband held her. Her family surrounded them. This, she thought. This is what I almost gave up on. This is what happens when you don't. Spring returned to the Callahan Ranch. Clara stood at the kitchen window, Hope asleep in her arms, watching her family spread across the land. Sam rode the fence line with Nate, learning the ranch that would one day be his. Josie helped Mrs. Cooper with the new class of students at Callahan Academy. The twins wrestled in the yard while Danny cheered them on. Mary read under the apple tree that was just beginning to bloom. Grace sat on the porch writing letters on her slate, a fluent speaker now at 7 years old. "Ma." Grace looked up. "Is Pa coming for dinner?" "He'll be here." "Good. I have something to tell him." "What's that?" Grace smiled, that rare, precious smile that still made Clara's heart ache. "I wrote a story about our family. Miss Peterson says it's very good." "I'm sure it is. It's about a man who was sad, and a woman who was lost, and 8 children who needed a home." Grace set down her slate. "It's about how they found each other and became real." "Became real?" "Like the Velveteen Rabbit. When you love something enough, it becomes real. That's what happened to us." Grace stood and walked to Clara's side. "We're real now. We're family." Clara pulled her close with her free arm. "We've always been real, sweetheart." "I know, but it took a while for us to believe it." Wise words from a 7-year-old. But then, Grace had always been old beyond her years. Silence had given her time to watch, to understand, to see truths that louder people missed. Nate and Sam appeared over the ridge, riding side by side, talking easily. Father and son. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. By the daily decision to show up for each other. "They look happy," Grace observed. "They are happy." "Are you happy, Mama?" Clara looked at her daughter, at the baby in her arms, at the children scattered across the land she now called home, at the husband riding toward her with a smile that still made her heart flutter. "I'm more than happy," she said. "I'm home." Dinner that night was chaos as always. 11 people around a table plus 1 baby in a cradle by Clara's chair. The noise was constant, the food disappeared fast, and Danny managed to spill gravy on himself within the first 5 minutes. Clara wouldn't have changed a single thing. "I want to propose a toast," Nate said, standing with his glass raised. "To 1 year. 1 year since a broken wagon stopped on my road and changed everything." "To 1 year?" the children echoed. To Clara, who had the courage to keep going when any sensible person would have given up. Clara smiled through sudden tears. To Sam, Josie, Will, Walt, Mary, Danny, Grace, and Thomas, who gave an old man a reason to live. The children beamed. And to Hope, who proved that miracles still happen. Baby Hope, as if on cue, let out a small coo. To family, Nate finished. Not the one we're born with, but the one we build. The one we choose. The one we fight for. To family, everyone said together. Clara stood and raised her own glass. "I want to add something." The table quieted. 1 year ago I had nothing. No money, no home, no hope. I had 8 children depending on me and no way to provide for them. I was desperate, starving at the end of my rope. She looked around the table, at the faces that had become her whole world. Then I met a man who was as broken as I was. A man who'd given up on life, on love, on everything that mattered. We were 2 people with nothing left to lose. She met Nate's eyes. And somehow, impossibly, we saved each other. We built something beautiful out of 2 broken lives. We proved that it's never too late to start over. Never too late to find family. Never too late to learn to love again. Clara raised her glass higher. To second chances. May we never take them for granted. To second chances, the family echoed. They drank, they ate, they laughed and argued and made plans for tomorrow and next week and next year. And Clara Callahan, who had once been Clara Weston, who had once been ruined and abandoned and alone, looked at her family and knew the truth. This was what she'd been searching for her whole life. Not Boston, with its wealth and society. Not Edward with his lies and charm. Not even safety, though she'd yearned for it so desperately. This. A table full of people who loved her. A husband who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. Children who called her mama and meant it with their whole hearts. After dinner, after the children were in bed, Clara stood at the window where it had all begun. Nate came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "The first time I saw you, standing on your porch, looking at me like I was your worst nightmare." "You were. A woman and 8 children showing up to disrupt my carefully maintained solitude. You could have turned us away." "No, I couldn't have." He kissed her temple. "That's the thing I've learned. I could have pretended to turn you away. I could have told myself I didn't care. But from the first moment I saw you stumbling up that drive, something in me woke up. Something that had been sleeping since Elizabeth died." "What?" "Hope." He turned her to face him. "You brought hope back into my life, Clara. You and those children. You reminded me that love is worth the risk, that family is worth the pain, that living is better than just surviving." "I could say the same about you." "Then we saved each other." "We saved each other." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Clara looked out at the land one more time, at the ranch that had become her home, at the school that bore their name, at the graves on the hill where Elizabeth and Sarah rested no longer alone. "Do you think they know?" she asked softly. "Elizabeth and Sarah, do you think they know we're happy?" Nate was quiet for a moment. "I think they know. I think Elizabeth sent you to me." "You believe that?" "I believe something brought you to my door on exactly the right day. I believe something made me walk out to check on a broken wagon when every instinct told me to stay hidden. I believe there's a reason 8 children needed us exactly when we needed them." He pulled her close. "Call it fate, or God, or Elizabeth's ghost. Something wanted us to find each other." Clara rested her head against his heart. "Then we better not waste it." "We won't. We've got a whole lifetime to prove we deserve it." "A whole lifetime. Children to raise, and a school to run, and a ranch to keep. Grandchildren maybe someday. Years of noise and chaos and love piled on love." It had started with a broken wagon and a desperate woman and a man who'd forgotten how to feel. It had become a family, real and imperfect, and absolutely unshakable. Clara Callahan looked at her husband, her home, her life, and spoke the truth she'd finally learned to believe. "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." And she was. Forever.